go to it. It's just too much.
Plug. I think that might be enough. There's a sound down here.
Got that on there.
Yeah.
Great. I didn't have a chance to Dropbox yet. I started uploading it earlier. I just did it as a mod, so it's challenge. Don't know what she wants to do now.
Sorry. I've just shook my hand. Did you have a lovely time? Was it brilliant?
Yeah.
But you still want to be there? People I know.
Hello.
Hello. You okay?
What's happening? Are you moving away? Are you moving
Yeah,
in?
I'm thinking it's great. I'm going to jump.
It's spending so much time here, just like,
Oh wow. Oh wow.
Yeah, I would like to see you. How do I tell you that?
What was it? 60 seconds? Film.
Yeah, 60, 15, 30. Yeah, moved around. About here, yeah.
Okay. I'd expect you to be able to film it more than 60 seconds.
And then if you don't know one, it's interpretive idea.
Okay, that's fine. Safety cabin crawls. We got through it. We got through it. Yeah.
No, looking a bit kind of rough, but
I've just mentioned kind of it's gone now. It's all that trauma. All that trauma, exactly.
Fine. Very different to me. But yeah, so just trying to
Brian says over
Christmas,
So she actually shouted at me, yes.
I saw Henry yesterday, he was quite jovial, but
you'll see how it is.
But I just had
Is it? No, you tell me.
And if you're on that end, she's looking straight.
Yeah. When we met.
I don't know.
This is mine now.
well done. Everybody's finding a place to sit. A little bit crowded. What do you think? I brought fruit for people. There are people that can sit up here, you know. It's really all right. Yeah, you can sit up here. I will buy one. Okay. Where did, I came in with somebody, where did he go? Where did Jonathan go? He ran out, he saw so many people. Oh, lucky hell.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, the danger
Okay.
is we get stuck here.
Anybody who has an illness, I've got a chesty cough, just take a sip of it. Okay, because nobody shares, because we're, find a seat, there's enough room here, there's 2 seats here, and there's 1 seat here. There's basically no seats there. There's a seat there, there's a seat there. Do you like this arrangement? This kind of really close, yeah? It's warm. It's Grace.
Yeah.
Hello, Grace. Come up here, Grace. I know we have 2 Graces here. Okay, let me just get my stuff out. Okay, welcome to a real experience of having a proper MA class rather than this ridiculous, horrible lecture scenario we were doing. I want to just do a couple of things before we get underway. The first is that I wanted to introduce Grace from the Student Union. And the second is that I want everybody else to introduce themselves. Partly for the camera. I want you to say your name, or whatever name you want to go by. I really don't care what your name is. But whatever name you want to go by on the web. We have an agreement that this is the World Wide Web and everybody's okay about that. It's like nobody's going to have a nervous breakdown and nobody's going to sue me. And okay, I'm not supposed to ask it that way. I'm supposed to just say, everybody's okay. Here's chesty cough. Okay. Okay, that's not. This is not chesty cough. It just says that. Also, there's your guide to giving blood. Sorry, that really could be taken very long. Okay, then I would like everybody to say their name and more or less kind of what they're working on. And from now on, we are a tight team. Yeah, it's much better, I think. Grace, over to you.
Oh, do you want me to introduce myself?
Sadly, yes.
Okay.
I don't know. You want to sit down so people can see you on the kick? There's a space there. Anna, yeah. Okay, Grace, go on.
Okay, my name's Grace, and I wish I was staying for this class now. This sounds fun.
Well, you can stay.
Oh, I can't drop it off, is it?
Small food.
It's just a kind of quick, kind of brief introduction of the Students' Union. As students, you are part of the Students' Union. We work to represent you whilst you're at university, if things are going wrong or if things are going right. We're having our elections from the 25th of Feb to the 1st of March, which you can do by logging onto the website, the Students' Union website. Of course, you are welcome to run for election if you so wish. We have full-time roles and we have part-time roles. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for
That's
listening.
it? That's all you're going to say?
That's all I'm going to say. Yeah.
Where is the Student Union?
The Students' Union, we don't have one at this campus. We have one at... Well, you know about space. So
No, what about it?
but we have one at Conservatoire, City South, Millennium Point, Gloucester Green and City North. So we're dotted around.
And if someone actually had a difficulty and they wanted to contact you for some reason, what would be some of the reasons?
If the course wasn't going right, if they were
that's
having...
not a reason.
Grace, what's your email?
I hate it. Yeah, just those kinds of things.
Okay.
Just representation and democracy of the university.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Good, thank you so much. What are you studying?
I work at the union and I lecture in criminology.
Oh, lecture, what type of lecture? What type of criminology?
We're talking criminology, crime and punishment, theories of crime.
Dostoevsky. Yeah.
It's fun, but I wish I was doing this. It sounds a lot more fun.
You can
than
always
I do.
come back.
Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, see ya. Thank you very much, Grace. Right, okay. I just want to. I will have your papers back from the last term, not this week, but not next week, but the week thereafter, I hope. Should be done by then. So, let us go around the table. Everybody can write, everybody's okay, everybody has space. Okay. Are we missing people? Probably.
Yeah,
We are.
there is one person who's coming.
Oh, okay, she's sitting in the lecture room. Okay, this is my office. It's also the Center for Fine Art Research. It's all, come on in.
Come in.
Hello, is this the person we're waiting for?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a seat here. Okay. The thing about this space, I am a very firm believer in the university, in a real university. What I mean by that is that often universities, for whatever reason, and I've been in them all, Ivy Leagues or whatever they call them over here, Russell groups, you know, private, public, blah, 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 they all have a tendency to try to stop thinking. It's fascinating, really, how that happens. So you just have to get it where you can get it. And so what I try to do is create a little magic garden. That's what this office is. There are books all around here. There's a PhD theses here and many others. If there's a book that you would like to borrow, you are welcome to borrow it. You have to sign it out. You can have it for like a week. Stuart.
You didn't tell me that.
Anyway, and as I have a photographic memory, I can remember what you've taken. But just check with me before you take it out so that I know I'm not using it. So I'm looking around trying to find it and then it's not there, and that'll give me a little bit of a nervous breakdown. The filing cabinet there, the first 3 files are all articles that may be of use. They're more or less in alphabetical order, so there's things with Hegel or Kierkegaard or things you haven't even thought about. Just go through it and you'll find things that you might find interesting. If there's more than 1 copy, you can have it. If there's not more than 1 copy, then you have to go photocopy it. It's very simple. If you don't go photocopy it, you have to bring it back immediately. You can't go photocopy it and then forget about it. Okay, so that's the other key. Okay, so we're all good about that? Yay. Okay, the PhD seminars happen here 1 to 4 on Tuesdays, and I think that's it. So,
That's all right, it's getting pulled. I'm Hannah Honeywell. My interests are at the moment looking at the idea and concepts of queer and also aligning that with anatomy in the body and identity and gender.
I'm Sally Bailey. I'm a painter, studying part-time in fine art. I'm currently looking at pattern, literally in terms of repeating patterns, what happens when that breaks down, and also in terms of connected to ideas of self, expected patterns of behaviour and conformity.
I'm Clovis, fine art practice. The reason I'm here is that, this thing never changed. Initially, I'm just here for a break, because I've been doing things for years. And after attending this course, inspired me in a way.
Great.
I decided to move on.
You decided to move here?
Yeah, to move on. I mean,
To move on, to leave. Okay,
yeah,
great. Okay, that's an interesting form of inspiration, but I can, you take what you can get. Okay.
Yeah, because I'm a trained painter, and I try to stop to paint, and
And so now you're going to continue painting? No.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad you're here anyway. Good.
John, I'm doing part-time art practice and education. I'm interested in cinefilm, sort of home film, and changing that. And making it, I call it cinegraphology, where I paint onto the film, and or an anti-animation sort of.
Anti-animation?
Yeah.
That's nice.
To see what forms and see what that relationship with the object and image.
Huh. And when you paint onto the film, you're painting with actual paint?
Yeah.
And so when it goes through a projector,
Yeah.
what happens? What?
30 seconds later.
What's that?
I'll show you later on.
Okay, sounds great. Okay.
My name's Grace. I'm first year part-time. No, I'm not.
She wishes. This is a wish fulfillment.
Part-time. I'm practice-led PhD student first year, and I'm interested in women in the realm of the supernatural, but also authenticity and authenticating the doubtful.
Yes, and also Grace, for her poor sins, is also the research assistant for CFAR and pretty much everything else. So
I'm the go-to person.
Well, she's the go-to person. Try not to go to her too often, but if you do need to do something, ask Grace. Grace.Williams2 at the rest of it, mail.bcu.ac.uk. Thanks.
I'm Luke, Robert Mason. I'm doing the Media Art Philosophy Practice course, and I'm interested in human enhancement and pushing the possibilities of that. So here to kind of explore.
And something.
Transhumanism, it kind of falls under extending the limits of the body and seeing how far we can go and how we can utilise art to envision possible futures for this bipedal thing that we call our bodies.
Great. See? And the more we do this every week, the more you'll remember what your projects are. It's fantastic. It's really great how this happens.
If in doubt, ask Grace.
That's right. Yeah, that's great.
Thanks, Grace.
She's the go-to person. Yeah, that's right. Yes.
I'm Jakub. I'm doing full-time fine art masters. I work with the idea of self-exploration as a creative process and where that leads to. I like text and how text operates within fine art practice and how you can connect those two. So, yeah.
And you also have a lot to do with like simple lines.
I tend to.
There's something about simple lines that
Yeah.
is very much a part of your work.
I haven't. Some things I do, they happen, and I then need to sit down and read why did they happen. You know, there's certain unskillness that involves me to wonder about my own work. It's quite fun, actually. It's
Great.
Discovering.
Good.
No.
Hi, I'm Anastasia. I'm in Arts and Education master course, full-time, and I'm interested in puppet making and puppet research in general. And yeah.
And you know, have you been over to Gloucester Green ever?
Yeah?
You know, the sack of potato thing, which I find so amazing. When I first came here, people said, oh yes, just meet me at the sack of potatoes. Like, oh my goodness, where have I landed? Okay. In the main building in Gloucester Green, they have puppets up now. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, so you take a little wander over to VisCom. You'll see there's one major puppet like on a wall. It's very creepy.
Okay.
There's something very creepy about puppets, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. A secret goth right there.
Hi, I'm Amy and I'm on the fine art. I'm part-time and I'm in year 2 of that course. And I make videos and video installation works that are to do with beauty, I suppose, and looking at the urban environment in particular, and finding things of intrigue within that maybe aren't traditionally seen as beautiful.
And also, there's a lot of melancholy and something very searing about the way in which you take the images. I'll just add these little things as I come on.
I'm Greg. I'm on part-time to fine art with Amy. My interest is really the geo-emotional and body and the material world, an emotional response, what's happening physically in an emotional response to an environment.
And you just came back from...
Yeah, this is my first day back.
And he's jet lagged, so we're going to ask a lot of questions.
I spent September, October, November and half of December in Japan learning how to make paper. as part of the residency over there, and this is the first time I've talked about it publicly.
All right, and
So,
now you've gone
yeah.
on the web. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
going to go public, I think it's very important.
So that's so I really got involved with using the material as a metaphor for the skin, and I really sort of.
So would you say that the paper becomes an extension of the human in this case?
For me, it did.
Yes,
It worked.
Luke.
It was fibre. It was fibre and fibrous, and I looked at it in a very physical way.
Yeah.
And it was a great privilege to learn how to do it, and the landscape was quite different over there. I really did look at the way they look at the landscape.
Where were you in Japan?
In a place called Mino,
Mino.
which is not far from Nagoya.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, small town.
Can you speak Japanese?
Not a word.
Uh-huh.
It made it, if anything, it made it worse actually.
Uh-huh.
I think I'd like to come back and learn here and then go back.
Yeah.
No,
I would think not knowing the language would really be a little bit of a hindrance.
We did have translators, but to be honest, after 3 drinks, it just didn't matter.
Good.
It really didn't matter. It was a great level. So.
When I was in Japan, I used to see all these signs that say, "You are here." And everything else would be in Japanese. I was like, I know I'm here. Okay, that's not helping me. It's like I don't know where else. So I took a whole series of photographs of "You are here." Wherever I was, you are here, now you're here, now you're here. I thought I was going to do this on my Hegel lecture. Never get out of here!
I'm Dane Warlow. I'm the MA Fine Art part-time. I do everything but paint. That's how to describe it. My research focuses on cognition and science of senses, specifically within sort of digital environments such as on the web, through video games maybe, and seeing how, and yeah, putting a sort of quantum or mathematical spin on that, see how those sort of feed into it.
So do you have you ever seen the book called, not the novel called Perfume, which is a very famous novel, but this book called Perfume, which is, it's a mad book that you should take a look at. It's
Mad, I'll look at it.
Oh, it's great. No, I wouldn't suggest anything else on that. But it's by this guy who's a very sort of prissy, bum sort of guy who's very obsessed with getting the smell right. And have you seen this book?
I've read it.
It's a fantastic book. I mean, I love this book because, and he rates them. He rates all the perfumes in the world as like, 4 stars, 5 stars, and he gives them like the death smell. It's like, don't ever come near this. What happened to this company? And then what he does is he actually explains, of course, that the smell in particular has nothing to do with nostalgia. It has nothing to do with memory. It has only to do with this sort of scientific relationship between codings and not codings, right? And at first I thought, I'm not going to like this book. And I turned out loving this book. Okay, so I recommend it to everybody, Perfume. I forget who wrote it. What's that? But
there's a movie about it as well.
Is there?
It's not so good as a book.
Ah.
But there is, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
I don't remember the right writer.
Ah.
But,
now there's a movie out called Perfume that's about a book of this guy who chops people's heads off, or I don't know, kills them and then sells them or does something with the perfume. That's another different book. I'm not talking about that particular book.
maybe this is the movie.
Yeah,
I'm
that
not
movie is
sure,
pretty crummy, and the
to be
book
honest.
is compelling, but, so you don't want to go to bed at night, just read the book.
I'm Sarah Gowdy. I'm on the part-time MA Fine Art course, and I do drawings and sculpture. I'm trying to work out how those two can,
And why do you do drawing and sculpture?
One's 2D, one's 3D.
Okay, that's a very
One's
interesting.
internal, one's outside.
And of course, 3D, as we'll find with Anna's work, there's 3D and then there's 3D. Like it goes very deep into perceptual. Okay.
Stuart Mugridge, first year Fine Art part-time, particularly interested in place and how it sort of surfaces in the visual arts, in landscape, through philosophy, through science. So yeah, particularly landscape, and perhaps with that British landscape tradition, particularly sort of sits behind my interest, my work.
Great.
There's a lot of stuff that comes into that.
Do you think that there's a link between you and Greg, for example, about
Yes.
the geopolitics?
Yeah, I think that
What would
I was
that link
interested
be?
in. Probably something to do with the culture, that defined culture in a broader sense.
Okay.
Maybe defines you, the way of looking, landscape has come into being, I suppose.
Greg will put his arm around you and say, okay.
I don't want to do that.
First of all. Okay.
But I will, I know.
I know, that.
I'm Stella. I'm doing the full-time arts and project management course. The reason why I'm here and what I'm interested in are not so relevant, so I don't know what I don't want.
Doesn't
I don't
matter.
know what
Make
to
it up.
say of them. If I'm here because I'm writing stuff, but I'm writing randomly, so I would like the motivation to do it more focused. On the other hand, I'm interested in films and how new media has changed the form of community that existed in the past, so I want to research the impact that new media has on the audience and the promoting methods they have and how the audience acts as a marketing tool for the films nowadays.
Here's someone you can speak to, okay?
Get drunk with. Roll times, that's how we know Stella. This is drunken bet with
I have to ask you about your t-shirt.
Sorry?
Your t-shirt, or whatever they call them. What do you call these things? T-shirt, yeah.
What about it?
Well, it's weird, and I really like it. What makes you wear this animal? Or is that a transhuman on you?
I just like the design. It's
Yes.
not,
So you just called to you.
the colors.
Mm-hmm. I like it too. I just thought it was. So I mean, most of us are wearing like black or black and gray. I went outward today. But, really expand horizons. So if someone has color on, I think, God, what happened? Nice. Okay. Okay, that's right. I know Jude just came in, but we're all introducing ourselves.
Right, okay.
You have to introduce yourself.
Right, okay. Now?
Yes.
Right, hi, I'm Jude. I'm doing the MA in Queer Studies, Arts and Culture. Basically, I'm doing that part-time. I work mainly in production design for film, collaborating with directors on films. Most of my work now tends to be for indie films and sort of campaigns for human trafficking, and I've also just done something for Mind UK as well, which is to do with mental health. I also do sort of set design for theatre, and my own work tends to be more installation work. So I'm here really because I have a lot of ideas of how I want to write and use interactive medias within my own work and installations. And really I'm interested in confronting people with possibly things they don't want to think about or look at. With me, the human trafficking thing is that a lot of people think prostitution doesn't affect them, but actually it affects everybody, because we all know somebody that's been on a chat line or something like that, and a lot of those sort of things, people think, oh well, the girls are doing it because it's extra pocket money. They don't actually realise they may be chatting to a man on the end of the chat line, and the girl is having to perform to do what he's asking. So I think there's a lot of, I want to use a lot of these issues and things that I'm working with to confront people and actually make them realise and use art in that format.
Great. Good.
Right. On a lighter note, I'm Anna Lorenz. I'm on the MA Fine Art full-time. My background is applied. Sorry, oops. My background.
It's right here. Let's get
Now, my background is applied arts, and really what I want to find out is I want to broaden my practice and want to see how can I locate it more within the fine art area. What I've done so far is to work still with objects or very small sculptures as such, and I've looked into depth within the work. I looked into perspective. I've started to use projections and frame the light projection and use that kind of fleeting, ephemeral quality. So I'm really testing things, but I haven't found a totally clear direction, and I hope that will happen within the next weeks to come.
And you were coming from a sort of jewelry metal.
Yeah, from a silversmithing background.
Silversmith.
Silversmithing and jewelry.
Not farrier though.
Second.
Of course. Never mind. I had a very long day. Joke only to myself. Okay, so sorry. Great, thanks.
Hi, I'm Kate. I lecture in drama at Newman University College. And the reason I'm here is because we have no research culture in the arts at all, and it's very exciting for me to be listening to artists speaking because it's such a refreshing change. Our research seminars are usually sports scientists or experimental psychologists. And it's awful. And I finished my PhD a year ago, and it was on playwright Edward Bond and Jacques Lacan, and it was called Drama and Desire.
Great. And so if you have all the time in the world, you also come on Tuesdays, 1 to 4, when we have the PhD crowd here. And it's there. Well, you come to that as well, Dane, who is like all of it. Yes. And that's pretty mad too, isn't it? Yes. It's an experience. That's right. He's going to lay on the but he always sits in that chair. That's your chair, isn't it? He's got his name on that chair. Don't ever sit in that chair. That's his chair. Okay.
I'm Anna. I'm also
don't say that you're
an interloper. I was going to say. I'm a sculptor. I think of myself as a sculptor, but my work predominantly over the last sort of 10 years or so has been video and sound.
Health and safety.
Sorry, very recent and very really sad. It's been predominantly video and sound objects. I'm very interested in projecting and working within spaces. Don't tend to make screen-based work. I'm really interested and intrigued by setting up situations and effects that affect people emotively, or give you a physical or emotive response when you're within a space. So that's what I sort of explore.
So again, the senses, but in a bit of a connection there. And also, you're thinking of doing something next year, right?
Yes, my plan, time allowing, etc., is to start a PhD.
Yeah, good, excellent.
Hi, I'm Kirsten. I finished my MA last year. My interest was I work in teaching, but I was very interested, and I did quite a lot of writing and work around a lot of the kind of the politics, really, of a lot of the practices that we take for granted and that are second nature to us, but actually really wondering, well, why are they second nature and why do we do things that we do? So I read people like Badu and Foucault and had lots of ideas about it, but really want to kind of embed those ideas and know where they come from and have a much, much deeper kind of understanding of where my thoughts, where my ideas are. My work is mainly film-based. It works with the medium of editing mostly, sometimes found footage, sometimes footage that I shoot myself. But it's very much looking at, and I don't think I'm getting there yet, but sort of unpicking the politics of how we read situations and behaviours and kind of things that are normalised in society that really we should be thinking more deeply about, perhaps. Very woolly thinking, but hopefully this is kind of starting to shape it down a bit.
Something. Yeah, it will do something.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm May. I'm studying full-time fine art, and the reason why I come here because I think that philosophy can help me to have a dialectical thinking.
Good. Because we're not going to do dialectics this semester, but that's all right. That's okay. We'll ease you into this new bit, but that's great. And where are you from originally?
China.
Where? Big place. Where in China?
Beijing.
Beijing. Wow. What made you come here?
Sorry?
How come you came here? What made you come here? You are here. What made you come here? Why are you here?
I want to study.
But how did you find Birmingham out of the whole world? I know English is difficult, but that's okay.
Just want
Good. Well, that's a good reason. I want to be here too, so that's why I'm here. So it's a good reason, but I'm going to come back to you on that and ask you too. Okay, we all ready to play ball? Okay. I asked you to do something last week. How many people rose to the occasion? Unbelievable! I love you guys. You can still do something, don't worry. It's like birthday presents.
Conservative dance.
No.
People always say to me, oh, I'm so sorry I missed your birthday. I accept gifts year round. You can never miss my birthday, okay? So don't worry about that. So what'd you guys do?
Made you a piece of video.
Okay. I don't know how to work that thing, so.
You gonna hand it back?
No. Did everybody make things with these kind of?
Is it Dropbox?
It's in the Dropbox.
It's in the Dropbox as well. Well done.
I'm not sure whether it.
Do you want me to set the computer up so?
I just want, so that we can show it on that.
Yeah, it'll come up on it.
Yeah, you can do it on this one as well. It turns out.
Does that link to?
It's supposed to, but do it on that. Okay. Now, while we're doing that, and you have your projector. Shall we just show that now? Yeah. And then while we do, we're just going to show two pieces. We're just going to show this one now and this yours, and then I'm going to go into the lecture. Okay, because we really have a lot to do. And then we every week we're going to show some more of these. Okay, you can do yours too. Yours too. All right. All right. No, it's okay. It's okay. I feel that. So does anyone want some fruit? It's very good for you. I mean, I'm telling you, these are just divine. Yeah, the pear's here. Anybody want an apple? It's kind of more, you know, symbolic. I had a photo of that. You want an apple? See? Another photo opportunity missed. Okay. So while they're setting up, and John, I hope you can just listen to this while you're setting up. And I hope you guys can listen to this while you're setting up. I feel this is not going to happen. Okay.
I'm hearing you.
This course is not happening.
Oh, shit.
Okay. This course is called Untimely Meditations. It's called Untimely Meditations, as I mentioned last week. You get it? Is it ready? Oh, you're ready? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going to
In two ways. There's two things I'm going to do, but let's do the first one.
Can we show it on that screen?
Yeah.
Is that possible? That white screen there. And you'll notice that there's some stuff under the table. This was from a PhD seminar. So I think it takes a long time to become a child. So, you know, when you become a PhD student, you really become very regressed. It's very important. Okay, obviously this wasn't happening as quickly as I thought.
Here we go.
Okay. Okay, lights, wait, lights. You want to say something about this?
Yeah.
That can just stay on that
It's
one.
part of an installation I did at Warsaw Gallery, which I'll just switch off for the moment, which included some physical objects that were being
Wait, before we do this, the camera's running and is going to get your coat, Luke.
Sorry.
Okay, however good looking that is. Okay, go on.
And so the idea was that I projected, painted this manipulated film onto objects, and I got a particular sculpture and painting. And this wasn't one of the ones I was going to do, but it had mirrors reflecting the images around the room.
So does that projector project onto that
projects
face?
onto this, so if
Oh yes, that'd probably be better.
do this for you.
Okay. Does anybody want to hold that? Or do you want to hold that?
I'll do this.
Is there any way you can get that so the camera can see it as well?
Nope. Try it. Go this way.
Now, of course, the task was to do this so that it explained why you loved being here.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's going to
This
come,
has
right?
given me the opportunity
To do that.
To do this. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Now go on. Let's see it.
So it's given me the opportunity to think about why it works and think about the emotions that pull up through abstract film and what happens with movement. And I've got reading Deleuze about the movement image and how the images are a slice of reality, and I'm trying to work out how this all works with that.
And is there some reason that you're using like a Super 8 or whatever that is?
Because it takes.
It's too expensive to paint on 35 millimeter.
It is, yeah. Yeah, I mean it's what I have. It's basically what I've got. And
so
it's what I used to use when I was a kid.
Okay, and there's a relationship to found object.
Yeah.
As well, it's easier to find that.
Yeah.
You know, at least at this moment in time.
And also the film I paint on, I haven't got that on here, but I've got film that I took when I was a child as well that I painted onto, and that also brings in, when I'm bringing in the cast heads, that brings in memory
and is that your head that's cast?
Yeah.
A little death mask-ish.
It is a bit.
Yeah, and is there anything to be said about that, or is that just how it is?
Well, I'm working out how, because when you put the film onto it, it brings it to life.
Mm-hmm.
And why is that? Why?
So it's kind of an animated, it's an anti-animated animation.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting artist named Roy something, I can't think of his name, in the 80s that used to put film onto, kind of curved objects that they would turn into cars and whatever.
Well, I was seeing Tony Osler now. He's just on the Bowie DVD video, and he's working in that area.
Yeah.
And there's a girl called Jennifer West in Los Angeles who does the same thing with 35 millimeter film, which uses chemicals and jam and all sorts of things.
And is there can you somehow think what's the relation between putting color and paint on this and, let's say, Untimely Meditations, or being like the relationship between, because you're right, I mean, very few places will let you explore in this way, but there are some that do. So the real question is, what is it about this relationship of developing that kind of way of thinking that comes through with this for here?
I'm thinking, that's what I wanted to find out, really.
Okay,
yeah,
let's see some more of it then.
Yeah, okay. And the interesting thing, if I just take this over here.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Is that on the ceiling, when you go around, you go.
Oh, right. It is interesting.
So I'm just playing around with it.
Yeah. It is interesting. And do you know what a Mobius strip is?
Yeah.
Good.
Let's see how that, how does that work?
How does a Mobius strip work?
Well, I know how the Mobius strip works, but I'm wondering how the reflection is on the...
You got to think, because what it's showing up there is one-dimensional moves out of a two-dimensional surface, which is interesting.
And it's also taken away from digital as well. I mean, to make it reliable, I have to put it into digital and I have to film it.
Annoying, isn't it?
Yeah. Because the whole, when it was in Warsaw, I made a loop for the whole thing. So the idea of the film, actually, the physicality of the film itself was part of the thinking and the movement of the film. But from there you don't see it, but as the film loops through a loop box, it tells its own story.
Very good, very good. Yes, that's very interesting. The whole thing with the 3 different levels going on. So every week we're going to have 2 or 3 of you show your work like this, by the way. So just so you know. That's what we're going to get everybody, we're going to do everybody's work. And I don't mean your work, I mean your work as answering the question so we can put it on the web, what makes you want to be here? And this makes sense to me. Combining forms of different science, dimensions, time, plaster, mirror. Yeah, great. Okay, thanks. Okay, are we ready to do Anna's, or shall we, okay? Or should we keep playing with John's thing? Thank you, I love that. Do you need that light off, or is that gonna be okay? Anna?
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Irritation of technology. It should work.
That's the usual sentence you say.
That's right.
Should work.
That's right. No? Okay, while they're fixing this, Luke, what's your thing? Do you need to use a technological? That's hilarious. Okay.
So Johnny asked a question why we're here, and I just want to kind of emulate the feeling of being here for me.
So you might be an artist after all. Who knew?
Specifically with this room.
Why is that?
Something that makes me very nervous about being in this
Then he has a heart attack and dies. Well done. Very good. That's quite. Did this not work yet?
We just managed to open it 3 times.
Okay, so while they're still trying to open that, does anybody have any comments about John and Luke's responses to this question? What is it about BIAD? What is it about CFAR? What is it about the School of Art?
I had a similar, the heartbeat, and I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about the Trump, I'm not talking Kierkegaard here, I'm talking about Amelia, but just the movement or something like this, water or whatever. Then the last time you heard that, it's this anticipation that you're in something, and it's really exciting, but completely terrifying at the same time.
Did you say that that's accurate?
That's about right.
That's about right.
Really exciting, we're completely
This doesn't seem to have sound. So is anyone's video not reliant on sound?
Okay, so we're going to do that next week then. Yours.
Yeah,
I
and
think
only
we're
the
gonna
ones
do
that are in
that.
Dropbox, so anyone's videos in Dropbox not needing sound.
They all need sound.
No, can be done without sound. Mine.
Okay, let's see yours
It
then.
kind of sound was good.
No, we should have the sound then.
Yeah, have the sound.
You know, I think if it should have the sound, we should have the
There's
sound.
a text as well. So. And you're right.
Which one is it, sorry?
The top one?
Yeah. Mine is only 30 seconds because, well, it only happened for 30 seconds. And the person realized.
You'll be happy for 30 seconds and then that's it. Okay. Oh, you guys are really demanding. Can you read that out loud, what that says?
The here and now. Oh. That's it.
Can you start that again? Is that possible?
Oh, that's how it starts. There's text comes in later, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
The here and now exists because I choose it. Would be easier to be a stir-fry making person, but well, I'm not that.
The here and now exists because I choose it.
Choose it. Might be not grammatically correct.
No, that's right.
I don't really. I was seeing that guy till yesterday. It kind of stopped. So also that point is there. I kind of thought to myself like, that's the thing. That's why like I choose, not even choose. It feels like it's not a choice. It feels like a natural progress. It feels I need to be here. There is no other option. There is no other place. There is no. It just feels natural. It feels like my place to be at this time, at this place. I should be here. And
Makes sense.
I also kind of thought about I'm not stir-fry making person. I'm not making home. I'm not making dinners. Sometimes I do, but like as in I'm not person who really thinks about what's gonna happen tomorrow or 20 years from now, or the plan doesn't really exist because I am living right now in a, let's say, dream, but that's very hopeful. The dream that I have, and yeah. So
Yes. Huh.
That's
Very good. Anyone else want to? That's fine. And we'll play it again when we have sound. So that.
It's a Madonna song, Borderline. We were watching that on TV. Yeah.
That's too funny.
Yeah, the guy
You
kind
guys are
of.
so serious, and it's Madonna.
Yeah, that's the guy kind of wanted. I don't know why he showed me concert of Madonna, and I can't say. I kind of sometimes like Madonna. Let's face it. But there is the kind of moment, and I filmed him, and then he realized I was filming him, so I needed to stop. And so he doesn't know he was filmed. And
Oh, great. So
that
we have a
should
little
not-
ethical concern here.
That should not be home. But I don't think he will ever ask. That's the kind of, he will never.
He probably won't ask because he probably doesn't know that you've done it.
Yeah, but as in, he would never be a person who would go to BIAD or to this research website.
And then suddenly this goes
check
viral,
them.
and he just happened to be walking along on in New York on Times Square and sees that he's doing stir fry. I could have been doing this, but I'm not such an idiot. Perfect. Then you're sued.
Well, we broke up.
That's funny.
Proven.
Okay. Anything else?
Mine does not have a sound, but it's very, I mean, according to what other people show, it's very superficial, so let's do it today.
Okay, let's do the superficial.
I
Okay.
mean, it's like I like this corner of the building because of that. And the
Okay,
story.
let's see. Let's see what this is.
Stella.
Stella, you need my help, Stella. Do you have the paper?
No.
So you can crawl under the table, but there's a lot of glitter under there. So
I know, I've seen it since I walked in here.
Those are the little steps.
It's kind of like going to the tower. Okay, everybody, that's great. Great hand for everybody. Well done. Of course, nobody in the web will know what that was. You have to come here. That's right.
These are the stairs.
That's excellent. Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Can we have a light so that people can see? Now, yes?
I was going to turn the jet on.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Press it again.
Okay, great. All right, we're ready to begin. Except we have one new person that showed up who's trying to be here very discreetly. Michaela, do you want to just introduce yourself? You have the disadvantage that everyone else knows you, but you will not know everyone else. That's right.
I work at BIAD.
You just got to say it really loud.
I'm Michaela, I work at BIAD. I work with Johnny on the Erasmus program, and yeah, I'm just taking part in these lessons because I'm interested in all of this.
And doing something next year.
Yeah.
And that something is?
The PhD.
Yes.
With Johnny's.
Pull it out of you. Okay, you ready? Is there enough? There's a light there you can turn on if you need light. Or not.
I want to talk.
Okay, now we shall begin again. I don't know what that sound is. Probably an alarm. That's right. Okay, perfect. Excellent. Okay, what I was saying, thank you. Every week before we start, we'll have like 2 or 3 of these, and then we'll have a little ballot or vote or whatever, where someone will come up with a montage, and we'll put them either together in some order or just pick a few or whatever and throw it on the CFAR website. Which is, I was going to say, the CFAR website, remembering that CFAR stands for Center for Fine Art Research, CFAR. When they told me that, they thought of it because you could see far, I almost had a heart attack. I was like, anyway, let's just pretend it doesn't mean that. That's just me. It just is a Center for Fine Art Research. The URL, which will go live on the 29th of January, is CFAR-BIAD.com. It will go, you'll be able to find all the uploaded videos of this course, also the PhD, but also what I'd like to do is invite you as researchers in this environment, because now we're sitting at the big people's table, little people's table, I don't know whether it's some table. Anyway, to send to Grace, Grace, she's hanging over there now. Grace, can you send to the MA list the request to have you fill out your research profile, and if you can get it back to her within the next few days, that would be fantastic. And it's asking you to put on an image, your CV, 4 or 5 of your pieces, explain what they are. Just throw them on. So no static image without at least a title. This is not decoration. This is like really serious research networking that we're trying to create an international community of artists, like-minded artists, and you're part of this world. So the unveiling of it will happen finally, miraculously, will happen the 29th of January. So, so if we can get everything in, that would be great. And it looks fabulous. It's kind of an amazing little site. And anybody that's in this room is welcome to be included as if you're not technically at CFAR/BIAD, if you're not technically there, if you're a serious interloper, or if you are teaching somewhere else, or you finish and whatever, then you will be coming in as an international associate researcher, and you can actually put that on your CV as such. So it's a serious thing. Any questions about that? That's my other speech. Okay, good. Now let's begin. All right. How many times are we going to begin before we begin? Yeah, many times. Okay, so the course is entitled Untimely Meditations, in part because I want us to think about time, in part because in thinking about time, I want it to problematize space, spatiality, dimension, all these kind of things. Now, I asked you to take a look at Foucault's Anti-Oedipus, or Anti-Oedipus, the Introduction to Anti-Oedipus. This is a book that was written by Deleuze, called Anti-Oedipus, Schizophrenia and Capitalism. It's quite a wild book, actually, and of course you're more than welcome to use that as your book review, which is due in a couple of weeks. But in any case, I just want to go over, we started last week by looking at Fluxus, and by reminding you, for those of you that were born after Fluxus, basically, so after 1969, more or less, which is basically everybody in this room. Although today I tried to get on Skype, and it just would not allow me on. I was having this long discussion with the web designer for CFAR, and I finally just created a new profile, and I put down that I was born in 2000, and they wouldn't let me on because I was underage. I just like thought I was going to lose it. First I put down that I was born in 1879, they wouldn't let me on because they knew I was dead. And then they wouldn't let me on because I was too young. I was like, who are you people? Anyway, but in Fluxus, as I said, it started playing around with the term event and happening. And that got lost in the deluge of things that happened when postmodernism via Lyotard came on the scene, where he wrote a book called The Postmodern Condition. And the postmodern condition is another secret ghost, or not so secret ghost, behind this course. And the postmodern condition asks the question, what is the condition? What happened to make this time period we're in emerge? And the time period we're in that emerged, Lyotard names postmodern. By postmodern, he means, on the one hand, the obvious, which is that which comes after modern, post. But he also means that which came before modern. So it's a little slightly irritating. So there's a little bit of a conceit going on there, and you need to just be aware of this. There's a book that he's written because he was in his evil headspace, because Lyotard, one of the reasons I love Lyotard is that he goes into evil brat mode. He throws tantrums. And so one book he wrote was called Libidinal Economy, which we'll look at toward the end of this course. The PhD students are looking at it more in depth, and this was a book that he called his fuck you book. He hated everybody by the time he wrote this book. He hated all the philosophers, he hated artists, he hated psychoanalysts, he just hated everybody. He wrote this book, Libidinal Economy. Well, when he wrote the postmodern condition, he got a lot of flack. This was actually a sociological treatise, not really a philosophy treatise. And he was actually analyzing the condition that modernity brought upon us. And he was basically saying most people make the argument that modernity brings on alienation. Modernity makes you feel that you are responsible for everything that goes on because of the invention of the individual. You know how we did that last week, or last semester? You know, where the great breakthrough with the Enlightenment was that finally you could say, I want, and to know that you want it. This was a big breakthrough. I mean, the idea that you didn't have the sort of wherewithal to say that kind of thing was just incredible. You know, it's kind of like, you know, Sod's Law. You know, when you have a piece of bread, you buttered it, and you drop it, and it falls butter side down. It's like, who knew that by having that view, that the one way it could be read, or the one way the society would manufacture this, was to make everybody feel this big for failing every 5 minutes. So the argument was that modernity produces, amongst many things, depending on if you're a captain of industry, it produces lots of money, ways to build things. But if you're not just the captain of industry, if you're just a schmo, then it produced a lot of things like guilt that you didn't do well. The fact, and that you were blamed for not doing well. So you have only yourself to blame. You made your bed, you go lie in it. All these kind of expressions, very much part of a modern culture. And so Lyotard wanted to talk about this alienation, and so he started talking about this thing called the condition that came out of modernity. And what he basically says is, you know what the problem is? The Enlightenment hasn't really happened. And that's why the postmodern condition sort of comes before modernity. Because what he's actually saying is, we haven't gotten to modernity yet. We actually haven't made it to the Enlightenment. What's happened is that if you really take seriously that question, dare to know, and you really are thinking, you're like Luke's heartbeat, you're like, you know, all right, I'm gonna take this plunge. Well, a lot of things happen when you take a plunge. There's no net. I don't mean the network. There's no safety net. You know, you want to try something wild and great, good luck, because you're not going to have family supporting you, there's going to be a lot of problems, basically. And that's only with your family. Let's say you really start to get, you know, like your work on trafficking and the whole problem of trafficking in women, you're going to have other people getting a little annoyed at you. So you're going to have whole groups getting annoyed, and finally the government might get annoyed. And, you know, so there's all these bubbling scenarios. So you could cast the time period. You throw your mind back to a time period you don't even know about, the so-called the 60s, which I think is eulogized to the point of being boring for me at this point. But there was the argument that to fight this alienation, to fight the blame that people were getting called for doing something that they didn't even do or didn't know they should do, or weren't becoming, you know, part of the machine, there was this view to start a countercultural revolution. It wasn't like somebody sat down, like we all sat down around the table and thought, okay, let's figure out what we're going to do. And okay, we got an idea, let's have the countercultural revolution. It started springing up. And so the question partly became, how come that happened? And how can we happen again? What is it that made those little shoots start happening against this monolithic machine. There was war, there's always wars going on. In this case it was Vietnam or Korea. There's different wars happening all over the place. And so the argument became, on the left, that the sort of traditional left, what used to be euphemistically called what's left of the left when that sort of fell apart, was arguing that, you know, it's a class struggle, and then of course women were saying, well, it might be a class struggle, but how come during the revolution I'm being asked to serve the coffee? You know, so in what way does class explain this? You know, and it was like, oh, well, that's all very important, but, you know, go back and give me some coffee. So this started making people angry. The same thing about being a person of color, or, you know, whatever, the various issues that were going on. How did this explain racism? How did it explain sexism? How did it explain these things that were everyday problems that these large arguments, mainly around dialectics, were able to present as a model, but didn't really go far enough in terms of the actual social movements. And one of the social movements, or a type of social movement started evolving, was Fluxus. F-L-U-X-U-S, Fluxus, which is on your Corcel outlet. Now, they weren't wildly political. I mean, people in this room are probably even more political than the Fluxus crowd, so that, you know, so think about it, because a lot of you aren't that political, I would go as far as to say, I say that with respect. And so they started doing things like, I don't know, making a painting in a hotel lobby. Not a hotel that they asked permission. Under the old American argument, easier to say you're sorry than to ask for permission. You know, much easier to ask for forgiveness than to say, oh, could I do this? No, they just did it. So there, these little moments would happen. And these little moments started getting kind of fun. And, you know, it's not by surprise that there was a lot of drugs involved, and that needs to be thought through. Like, what is the relationship to drugs on this? What is the relationship to, you know, free sex? Sex, drugs, rock and roll. And it was more or less in that order, except it didn't apply to everybody. This was the problem. You could have sex, drugs, and rock and roll if you were basically white male and in Harvard. You know, something like this is like, you know, they had all these different like criteria. Timothy Leary, very interesting. Anyway, I give you this kind of bare narrative, do with it what you will, to give you a sense of the variety of ways in which people have tried to fight against the kind of overarching obsession that the social seems to take on about creating a status quo where everyone will go to their corner and be quiet and be exhausted. Like, if you can't be quiet and be a good little girl or boy or transgendered person or whatever, if you can't be quiet, then we'll have to silence you. And if you can't be silenced, then we have to do something. And it was almost as though there was a big brother coming in and silencing. So there was a whole argument about what was the role of the state and what's the difference between a state and a nation. And, you know, all these kind of questions were going on. They're coming back onto the agenda, which I find fascinating. You live long enough, things repeat themselves and talk about patterns. You know, anyway, hence I think I was correct to say that I was born in 1879, but anyway, that's another issue. Now, again, filtering this around, think about even the nostalgic view of what really most people here would think about might go under this title called the 60s, or the famous thing called 68. I mean, what was it about 68 where everything seemed to be happening? It's a funny year, 68. It happened all over the place. Well, you know, in 1848, it was also an interesting year. Because in that year, there were Paris communes, and there was the fight against, there was sort of like an international Marxism movement that was going on. How come? I mean, because honestly, they didn't have Twitter. They didn't have communication in the same way we do. So what is it about 1848 that kept popping up in all these different countries and freaked people out? How did that work? Part of it was the printing press, and part of it was something else. We're not going to go into that. I'm just raising this as little, certain years take on this kind of glory moment. 1848, 1945, 1968. They have these, sometimes there's these big events, end of World War II. Sometimes 1929, stock market crash. You know, well, what's the, you know, later on, really what people would be talking about when they were talking about 68 was really the 1980s, which, in fact, 1968 really went from 68 to like 73. It was a long year. That was the 60s. The 60s weren't in the early 60s. The 60s happened like they started happening around 64-ish. You might say with the Beatles, you know. But anyway, they really got underway in 68, and they went for about 4 or 5 years. So if you're lucky enough to be in that kind of moment, which was apparently really interesting, fantastic. And then the 70s went for about 2 years. The 70s went from like 1974-ish, maybe went for 4 years, to 78 or so, maybe 77. And then suddenly we were in the 80s. And the 80s went from like 1977 to about 1992. It was a very long period, the 80s. It really went longer than a decade. Now, this is a very different way to calculate time. This is a very different way to calculate culture. And there's a method to this, and that's why I'm giving you this kind of thing. So then after, you know, the 80s, we extended for, then we had the 90s. The 90s was a kind of creepy period because the 90s was always worried about, you know, what happens when the new millennium comes. So there's all this end of life, end of the world, Nostradamus. So Nostradamus comes around every like couple of years. Oh yes, and you know, what was the Mayan calendar last month? You know, but anyway. And the 90s went from about 1992 or 3 to probably about 1995. They had a very short life, the 90s. And then we started creeping into the noughts, or the noughties, as people would come to England, you know, learn to speak a different world. Anyway, and the noughties started. I used that expression in the US and they were looking at me like, what are you talking about? Also, the expression smalls. You know what smalls are? Underwear. Someone said, oh, you know, do you have your smalls? I was like, sorry. Smalls. So for you that are learning English, you can learn this, like with me, I learned in. Okay, so they went till about 2002 or so, and then came the I don't know what, the kind of the lost generation, which was part of the 90s, the X generation, but now it became the lost and found generation, but they were still the lost generation. And these are all these kind of weird Big Brother shows, you know, go to Australia, find, you know, what it's called, Celebrity Get Me Out of Here, or whatever it's called, that one. Come Dine With Me, these kind of weird programs, which I, you know, watched. When I broke my back, I saw all these programs. You know, I didn't even have the excuse that, you know, oh, you've broken your back, you can lie on your back and just read. No, I laid on my back and watched, you know, Murder, She Wrote, all of them. Diagnosis Murder, all of them. You know, Battlestar Galactica, everything. You know, I was like, that looks interesting. That went, that time period, and television started kicking in, the internet started kicking in. Who knows why the decades get named, like what comes with it. But people have a bit of an argument about it, a bit of a way of presenting this. Because clearly the dialectical argument, as wonderful as it was, in the sense that it gave you a sense of totality, and a sense that the argument had to happen within the argument, you couldn't come up with an extra level of logic happening over here, extraneous points happening there. How do you know? It always goes back to the question, how do you know what you're saying is not just your opinion? Not that your opinion isn't vital and interesting and wonderful, but it could be completely wrong, or anyway not interesting, as it turns out. You know, Jean Genet in Our Lady of the Flowers, you're not allowed to take that one out, but it is, you can read it here, because it's the original edition. Our Lady of the Flowers, he writes in there, every man loves the smell of his own fart. It's a very famous expression. And it's true. By man, I mean everybody, but you know, it's true. You know, because you don't smell it unless it's particularly bad. And then you pretend, if you can get away with it, somebody else has done it. You go, oh God, what is that terrible smell? You know, but no, it turns out that often you can't tell because you don't know. You're too close to it. It's too much a part of yourself. So the question always goes back to, how do you know that what is being produced is A, real, B, unique, or C, true? Now we start moving into the harder core things. So this book came out by Deleuze called, and the partner, Deleuze and Guattari, are all part of this. Guattari spelled Guattari. And Deleuze writes in he basically makes an argument that you have to get away from this dialectical reasoning. you have to get away from the whole logic that was set up in semiotics and in psychoanalysis around this thing called representation, or this thing called how can I put it? I'm trying to say in a way that you can hear it. You sort of had to get away from what in anybody studied Lacan or psychoanalysis at all? There's an argument that's quite famous that Lacan puts forward in his four fundamentals of psychoanalysis, and what he's arguing, and this has became very much the case, he argues that there is this thing called the lack, and it's without trying, he would always add to say that he's not meaning by the lack females, but it is always the case that the female was always connected with this thing called the lack. And in Freud, the primal scene of founding civilization, the primal scene of finding and founding civilization was castration, castrating the father. So what Freud argues, sorry, I skipped a little bit there, lack. What Freud argues in Totem and Taboo, he says that every society requires the overthrow of the father. Remember we talked about the father's no last year? So long ago when you were children, now you're much older now. But the founding of a society requires that the sons, or now we can stretch this with sons and daughters, every generation castrates or tries to castrate the father. So keep your pants on. Stay away from those knives. And the argument is that's what rebellion is about. That's what social rebellion is about. So if your parents are one type, you will go against it. And that's a form of castration. Not your own castration, mind you, your parents. And the more horror they get, the more you're castrating the situation. Except for the fact that since women don't have testicles, it's difficult to be castrated. So part of the argument that Freud put forward is that the horror of finding out that one is a woman is that one realizes that one is born castrated. You can see how annoying this argument can get. Okay. And still, I love Freud because I'll explain why. But anyway, so the woman lacks, and the man doesn't lack, but is threatened by the fear of castration. And who best to castrate a male? Other men, A. Women. What do you think was the answer? Women. And why would women want to castrate men? What do you think would be the argument?
To make them equal.
Yes. Because, and not just to make them equal, but because there's an envy called penis envy. I'm serious. This is what I'm telling you. This is what it's called, penis envy. And the argument goes that women, especially women that are aggressive and virile and have male names, or take them on, are actually this kind of projectile, i.e. phallic. I used to drive a sports car. In fact, I used to drive many sports cars because I love sports cars. And the faster, the lower, the quicker is great. And people would say to me, why do you want to drive a penis mobile? It's like, hello? In what way does this look like anything other than a flashy clit? They were like, I never thought of that. Well, of course not. You didn't think of that because you have this idiotic view that, that everything has to come down to this particular notion of the projectile. So I'm just telling you this because I had to get off my chest. But also because the thing is that when you ask the question, what does it mean to talk about this castration, this lack, this question of the phallic, always will be the answer, it's not really about men, and it's not really about women. And secretly, it is completely about men and completely about women. I even asked Slavoj Žižek, who you have probably heard of, and usually the guy that they herald in schools of art. Another reason you should come here. I asked him, Slavo, who, you know, I have a lot of respect for on one level, although he has only written one book many times. Good on him, I say. It's like, did well, Slavo. Anyway, he used to come up with these charts. And I don't know if you know what Slavoj Žižek looks like. He looks like a mad version of Marx. So his hair is out like this, he's cross-eyed, you know, he's like a big guy, you know. He's very funny. Anyway, and he was saying, you know, he gave a paper called The Impossibility of Heterosexuality. And the reason it was impossible was because the women were always trying to chop off the phallus, you know, and also on top of everything else there was lack going on. There was the logos. The logos is the logic of the dialectic. The logos is that the way in which the father, the logos, you know, there's this castration issue, there's this lack issue, there's a phallus. It's very difficult to have dinner, you know, not to mention have sex. So he had this thing, and he said, and he had this argument. He said, you know, this is the impossibility of heterosexuality. And I said, well, that's interesting, Slavo. I never realized you were such a radical homosexual. And he's very homophobic, so he was like, what makes you say this? I said, well, you know, I guess if all the men, or let's say all the phallic beings are on this side, and all the lacks are on this side, and they can't seem to cross over because there's an abyss, then they're not sitting there knitting. I mean, you know, they must be doing something. So, and he turned to me and he said, well, you know, I can see how the men could be having sex, but what about those people that are lacking? I said, you mean like two holes? They just, you know, nothing can happen. You know, so I raise this to you like this because these were the kind of solutions that were being put to the questions of how to get rid of the status quo and the horror of the status. See what an uphill battle it's been? And we're still in that battle. So again, I circle back to Deleuze and Guattari and Foucault. And then we're going to get to Heidegger. In Deleuze, in his anti-Oedipus, it's called anti-Oedipus. So you got the Oedipal, O-E-D-I-P-A-L. Oedipal. Do you know who Oedipus is? You know, he's the one that, you know, slept with his mother, killed his father. You know, this is why it's called the Oedipal complex, by the way, because Freud's argument is that every boy eventually, in order to become a man, needs psychically to kill the father and sleep with the mother. And then the guilt of that is profound, and the whole cycle starts again. So that when, you know, the boys become fathers, then they get killed off, and so it's just a, you know, no one gets out of childhood unscathed, basically, in the Freudian, and it's probably not untrue in a lot of ways, but he had a little issue with the girls, because of course everyone's supposed to, you know, grow up wanting to, you know, kill the father and sleep with the mother. So if that were really true, you'd only have lesbians and heterosexual men running around. It was like, the, you know, so obviously there'd be a very serious issue going on, you know, what would happen in this case. So Freud had a little caveat about the Electra complex, because see, the girl then has to do a second thing, because the girl realizes she can and must kill off the father. She must become the father. Hence butch lesbians. She must become the father and sleep with the mother. But of course, there has to be heterosexuality. So at some point, she has to realize the horror of that, the fact that she is lacking a phallic, a cock, a penis. She's lacking this, the horror of realizing this. And in realizing this, she then has to have a baby, which has to be male. Hence, that way she can now have a kind of psychical penis. I know this must sound completely bizarre, but not really when you think about it. It's even worse when you actually start thinking that, this actually makes some kind of horrible sense. Knew there was something wrong with the drinking water. Okay, now, so what the sort of position is then all the sort of tinkering around with how this can be resolved, not resolved, because one of the great things about Freud, one of the wonderful things about Freud, one of the reasons that you should read Freud, and really read him, is that he made the argument that identity itself is always a projection. And therefore, it's a social projection. So it kind of speaks to John's work a little bit. This way of projecting, this way of throwing something out. The identity gets established not because you're walking in, I have an identity, and you plop yourself down. But the identity itself gets established always in a relation. It's always socially initiated. So if you take a child and you put that child in a closet somewhere and you starve it of social interaction, it will not be human. Is basically what Freud is arguing. And they have actually had, sadly, they've had studies like this, which is another issue altogether about child abuse, but anyway. And so let's just recap. So the Oedipal complex is the complex when the boy hits puberty and the girl, and they both hit puberty, and they both begin, their hormones are racing, and they begin to realize they want to go out in the world, and the world is offered through the male for a variety of reasons. A, misogyny. B, the woman is taking care of a whole load of children and therefore can't actually get out in the world. C, misogyny. You know, it's basically this kind of scenario is going. So the child looks around and goes, you know, if I were to choose, I would choose to be male. Because the shit that the woman has to go through just is not good, unless you have to do this whole other thing of becoming subordinate to this rule. So, but then the girl realizes she can't really become male, unless of course she turns out to be a lesbian, and then and a very specific kind of lesbian. It has to be a very butch, you know, male lesbian. Okay, so that's another issue. And then there's this other problem, and what about the gay boy who decides he doesn't want to sleep with the mother. He wants to kill the mother and sleep with the father. So that's another whole issue. And now we've got a real problem, because why does the boy want to identify with the mother? Because maybe he sees the father in a horrible way to the mother. Or maybe he sees that there's a lot of unfairness in the relationship. And therefore he sides with the mother to protect her. He has no interest in sleeping with her. He just wants to protect her. And he wants to get he wants to tame the father. What better way to tame somebody than to have sex with them? Goes the argument. Now, it's fascinating. It's worth decades of reading. And I'm not trying to put you off of it. I'm trying to get you to think about it in a real way. Lacan comes into the picture, and he says, Jacques Lacan, L-A-C-A-N, comes into the picture, and he says, whereas Freud was saying that the unconscious is structured like an ocean, like a bubbling cauldron, sexual energy. And that's where your dreams come from, that's where the symbols come from. What Lacan says is actually the unconscious is structured like a language. It became a very famous statement in Lacan. And he actually, you can read about this in his other book called Écrit, E-C-R-I-T-S, Écrit. Now we're not going to get it. I'm almost caricaturing him, and I really am caricaturing him, so that you get a sense of what is at issue here for Deleuze and Guattari and Foucault, and Lyotard, who's already at his I can't stand anybody now phase. You know, I've had it with everybody. I've had it with the socialist, I've had it with the neo-fascist, I've had it with everybody. I just add the conservatives are just, you know, forget it, had it. And he goes back in the Liberal Economy and says, let's try and retrieve Freud. Let's try and make Freud work for us. Let's see what it really means to have sexualness as the core of identity. And stop with this, want to sleep with the mother, sleep with the father, don't sleep with the mother, don't sleep with the father. What about not having something that's against? Is it possible to have an identity that is not built up against something? So just bracket that for a second. So his book, Anti-Oedipal, the anti-Oedipal moment, Anti-Oedipus, is about, is there a way to think, to maintain the sexual, to maintain the erotic, to maintain the pornography, the coarse, the rough, the sensuous, and at the same time, be playful, be loving, have a civilization, have order, you know, this kind of thing. So this is what he's getting at in that book. And Foucault, Michel Foucault, wonderful Michel Foucault, one of these honest intellectuals, rare breed, says in the introduction that one must learn how to get away from the question of castration and the question of lack and the question of logos and the question of the father, which has for so long, he says, stymied everything that has to do with creative thinking, and has created a form of power that one could call patriarchal or masculinist. But that isn't what it is to be male, it isn't what it is to be female, it's none of those things. So I'm just going to read you the introduction a little bit, because I think it's quite good, and I need to hear it. And it was so inspiring to me that if I don't burst out weeping, it would be a miracle. I think I told you this before. I worked with Foucault. I was very lucky. I was very lucky. You know, sometimes you're just lucky. That was one of those times. And like I said, being in his presence was like, it was like being in gold dust. You know, just like a little fairy dust. And you just go, oh, that's lovely. You know, you'd be like, yeah, must become more disciplined in my thinking, you know? Oh, yes, that's great. Okay, he writes, during the years 1940, it's very short, this preface. During the years 1945 to 65, I am referring to Europe, there was a certain way of thinking correctly, a certain style of political discourse, a certain ethics of the intellectual. One had to be on familiar terms with Marx, not let one's dreams stray too far from Freud, and one had to treat sign systems, the signifier, with the greatest respect. That's like the basis of semiotics, and the question of language, consciousness structured like a language. These were the three requirements that made the strange occupation of writing and speaking a measure of truth about oneself and one's time acceptable. Be on familiar terms with Marx, not stray too far from Freud, and get with the program on semiotics. Saussure, and for those of you that have gone through the system, you know, you've heard this stuff. You've heard signs, signifier, signified till the cows come home. Then came the 5 brief, impassioned, jubilant, enigmatic years. At the gates of our world, there was Vietnam, of course, and the first major blow to the powers that be. But here, inside our walls, what exactly was taking place? An amalgam of revolutionary and anti-repressive politics? A war fought on 2 fronts against social exploitation and psychic repression? A surge of libido? He's talking about the 60s, talking about the late 60s. What's going on here? A surge of libido modulated by class struggle? Perhaps. At any rate, it is this familiar dualistic interpretation that has laid claim to the events of those years, that it was either about sexual exploitation and the right to be free, free love, sexuality, and on the other hand, getting over exploitation. He's saying that is just not the picture. So he says, perhaps that's what was going on. At any rate, it is this familiar dualistic interpretation that has laid claim to the events of those years. The dream that it cast its spell between the First World War and fascism over the dreamiest parts of Europe, the Germany of Wilhelm Reich and the France of the Surrealist, had returned and set fire to reality itself, Marx and Freud in the same incandescent light. But is that really what happened? Had the utopian project of the 30s been resumed, this time on the scale of historical practice? Because remember, the 30s, while it led to fascism and the black shirts and Kristallnacht, when people were rounded up because of their religion or their skin color or the fact they were gypsies or Roma or whatever, that leading up to that was what do you call it, the nightclubs, the wild, I can't remember. What's that? The cat clubs, but what's that big, the Berlin, the drag queens and the cabaret, which I recommend everybody watching the movie if you haven't seen it. Great, if the play's still on in London, you should. It probably isn't, but it's really brilliant. He said, so the 30s, which was wild and sexually free and led to Kristallnacht. pretty incredible. He says, but is that what really happened? Had the utopian project of the 30s been resumed, this time on the scale of historical practice? Or was there, on the contrary, a movement toward political struggles that no longer conformed to the model that Marxist tradition had prescribed? Toward an experience and a technology of desire that were no longer Freudian? It is true that the old banners were raised, but the combat shifted and spread into new zones. Anti-Oedipus shows us, first of all, how much ground has been covered. But it does more than that. It wastes no time in discrediting the old idols, even though it does not have a great deal of fun with them. It does not have a great deal, even though it does have a great deal of fun with Freud. Most important, it motivates us to go further. Sadly, I'd like to add, we have not gotten much further than this, and this was written, I think, in the early 70s. It would be a mistake to read Anti-Oedipus as the new theoretical reference, parenthesis, you know, that much heralded theory that finally encompasses everything, that finally totalizes and reassures, the one that tells us we, quote, need so badly in our age of dispersion and specialization where, quote, hope is lacking. One must not look for a, quote, philosophy amid the extraordinary profusion of new notions and surprise concepts. Anti-Oedipus is not a flashy Hegel. I think that Anti-Oedipus can best be read as a, quote, art, in the sense that it is conveyed by the term of erotic art. I think that Anti-Oedipus can best be read as an art, in the sense that it is conveyed by the term erotic art. For example, informed by the seemingly abstract notions of multiplicities, flows, arrangements, connections, weird connections, happenstance connections, events, the happenings, fluxus. The analysis of the relationship of desire to reality and to capitalist machine yields answers to concrete questions, questions that are less concerned with why this or that than rather how did it happen. He says don't ask the question why, not because it's not important, but because it won't give you any answers. It'll just tell you what you already know, or what you already think you know. You have to ask, how did it happen? You have to show, when did it happen? Or even that it happened. They will bring you answers. So he says, how does one introduce desire? How does one introduce pleasure into thought, into discourse, into action? How can and must desire deploy its forces within the political domain and grow more intense in the process of overturning and establishing order? Ars, A-R-S, this is Latin, ars erotica, ars theoretical, erotic art, erotic theory, erotic politics. That's the answer. That's where he's going. Whence the three adversaries confronted by Anti-Oedipus? Three adversaries who do not have the same strength, who represent varying degrees of danger, and whom the book combats in different ways. 1. The political ascetics, the sad militant, the terrorist of theory, those who preserve the pure order of politics and political discourse, bureaucrats of the revolution, he calls them, and civil servants of truth. Bureaucrats of the revolution. 2. The poor technicians of desire, those that wish that they were talking about desire, those that wish they were dealing with pleasure, but in fact have just talked about some stale, weird, dead version of desire. He calls that the psychoanalyst and the semiologist, who really have never understood a thing about pleasure. The psychoanalyst and semiologist of every sign and symptom, who would subjugate the multiplicity of desire and pleasure to the twofold law of structure, i.e. the phallus, and lack. 3. Last but not least, the major enemy, the strategic adversary, is fascism. Whereas Anti-Oedipus' opposition to the others is more of a tactical engagement, and not only historical fascism, but the fascism of Hitler and the fascism of Mussolini, which was able to mobilize and use the desires of the masses effectively, but also the fascism in us all, in our heads and in our everyday behavior, the fascism that causes us to love power to desire the very thing that dominates and exploits us. So those are the three things: the political aesthetics, which he calls the sad militants, the terrorist of theories, the poor technicians of desire, like the people who talk about sex but would be caught dead, would not be caught dead in a brothel, would hate the prostitutes. I don't mean the prostitutes that are, I mean would go after the women as opposed to what's causing all this. And last but not least, the major enemy, fascism. And what is fascism? Fascism, as we mentioned last term, is when the mass agrees with something. It's not a dictatorship as such. It comes with a general agreement. I would say that Anti-Oedipus, may its authors forgive me, is a book of ethics. The first book of ethics to be written in France in quite a long time. Perhaps that explains why its success was not limited to a particular readership. Being anti-Oedipal has become a lifestyle, a way of thinking and living. How does one keep from being fascist, even especially when one believes oneself to be a revolutionary militant? Especially if you are a revolutionary militant, how do you not go around and beat people on the head going, you will believe this? How does one keep from being a fascist, even when, especially when one believes oneself to be a revolutionary militant? How do we rid ourselves, our speech acts and our acts, our hearts and our pleasures of fascism? How do we ferret out the fascism that is ingrained in our behavior? The Christian moralists sought out the traces of the flesh, lodged deep within the soul. That's how they thought they would get rid of this kind of horror. Deleuze and Guattari, for their part, pursue the slightest traces of fascism written over the body. Paying a modest tribute to Saint Francis de Sales, one might say that Anti-Oedipus is an introduction to the non-fascist life. And he says that this introduction is what he would call the art of the political. A non-fascist life is the art of the political. He says this art is a living encounter. It's a living way to not only dare to know, which he's not saying here, but it's a living way of maintaining the fact that you're continuing to ask questions, but not forget that you only are asking questions. You do know things too. This art of living, counter to all forms of fascism, whether already present or impending, carries with it a certain number of essential principles, which I will summarize as follows if I were to make this great book into a manual or guide for everyday life. 1. Free political action from all unitary and totalizing paranoia, stroke dialectics. Free, so you want to have a women's revolution? You want to talk about feminism? It's not against men, because that's not the dialectic. That's a very poor way of understanding how that happens. And yet, there has to be political strategies when sometimes that matters. So he's talking about free political action from all unitary and totalizing paranoia. 2, develop action, thought, and desire or pleasure by proliferation, by more action, more pleasure, more thinking, by proliferation, juxtaposition, and disjunction, and not by subdivision and pyramidal or pyramid hierarchization. Speak now. Right. My favorite: withdraw allegiance from the old categories of the negative. What are those categories? The law, the limit, the castration, the lack, the lacuna, which Western thought has for so long held sacred as a form of power and an access to reality. Prefer what is positive and multiple. Prefer difference over uniformity. Flows over unities. Mobile arrangements over systems. Believe that what is productive is not sedimentary, i.e. just static. What is productive is nomadic. It's being a nomad. Do not think, next one, do not think, my next favorite one, do not think that one has to be sad in order to be a militant, even though the thing one is fighting is abominable. It is the connection of pleasures and desires to reality, and not its retreat into the forms of representation. It is the connection of taking pleasure to reality and not retreating into forms of representation that possesses revolutionary force. Next, do not use thought to ground a political practice in truth. Do not use the concept to allow you to go where you're going. Do not use thought to ground your artwork, nor political action to discredit as mere speculation a line of thought. Do not use thought to ground a political practice in truth, nor political action to discredit as mere speculation a line of thought. Use political practice as an intensifier of thought, and analysis as a multiplier of the forms and domains for that intervention of political action. Next, do not demand of politics that it restore the so-called rights of the individual as philosophy has defined them. The individual is the product of power. What is needed is to de-individualize. What is needed is to de-individualize by means of multiplications and displacements, diverse combinations. The group must not be the organic bond uniting hierarchicalized individuals. The group must not be an organic bond that unites a hierarchy of individuals, but a constant generator of de-individualization. Have a group, but the group shouldn't close down who you are. It should open it up. The group should give you an ability to breathe, hence what a university really should be. Last, do not become enamored of power. Now, last paragraph, and then we're done with his introduction. It could even be said that Deleuze and Guattari care so little for power that they have tried to neutralize the effects of power linked to their own discourse, hence the games and snares scattered throughout the book, rendering its translation a feat of real prowess. But these are not the familiar traps of rhetoric. The latter, the familiar traps of rhetoric, work to sway the reader without his being aware of the manipulation and ultimately win him or her over against their will. The traps of anti-Oedipus are those of humor. So many invitations to let oneself be put out, to take one's leave of the text and slam the door shut. The book often leads one to believe it is all fun and games when something essential is taking place, something of extreme seriousness, the tracking down of all varieties of fascism, from the enormous ones that surround and crush us to the petty ones that constitute the tyrannical bitterness of our everyday lives. Now we weep. That's Foucault. Now, I share that with you. I read it to you aloud so that you get really, or I hope you can begin to hear, begin to become attuned to what really is at stake here by bringing these concepts into a so-called untimely meditation. What is being brought to you is to say, the problem that was raised last term, and the problem that in philosophy, in media, in art theory, you name it, it keeps coming back to it, is that one wants to have one logic to explain the whole of reality. Why people can't go to physics and think about string theory, where it could possibly be the explanation of everything, but it's done in very different ways. Subnote. That the fear of thinking outside the so-called famous box, the fear about thinking outside the box is not unjustified, because a lot of times you just end up with opinions. You just end up with the smell of your own fart. And that is not good enough, actually, as it turns out. So what you need to get a sense of, and what this course will give you, is what was the trajectory that was taken, and how it worked, and how it didn't work. But its failures are far more interesting, I find, than the failures of the Heideggarian system, which failed but then keeps going back to itself. So I opened up the session last week with the questions of fluxus, the happenings. Stage a happening, just like you guys did just now. That was a happening. That was a happening. That was a happening. You know how to do it without even being told, make a happening. Make something happen. Because you're not making something happen. You notice that you're not making something happening. A happening is something different. A happening is not making something happening. It is happening. It is the ing, I-N-G. It's the gerund. Gerund. You know what a gerund is? G-E-R-R-A-N-D. Gerund. For those of you that are dealing with English as a second language, you learn these things. Gerund, in my day, you learned it as a first language, but anyway, stab on education. Gerund means it's an ing, it means moving. It's anything that moves. It's transitive. It's transitive. Instead of time, timing. Instead of space, spacing. Instead of this entity called love, loving. Ing, moving, wishing, blue, and the other thing that's next to ing is ish. Bluish, reddish. The ish, and the ish travels. Male-ish, female-ish, androgynous-ish, right? Hermaphrodite-ish, something. The ish, it moves. You know how these happenings operate. But how does one begin to really deal with it? One begins to deal with it by talking about it on one level, in this sort of intellectual way of doing it, and the other level is to allow yourself to get how the network society is becoming the predominant way in which a happening just makes sense. It becomes a typical expression of that. Now that's an interesting question. How come the information age, as we'll call it, or the network society, you don't have to have a computer, or for that matter an iPhone, to be part of a network society. You could want to be outside the network society all you want, and you're still part of the network society, sadly. And it's not, I don't mean that because of a socioeconomic thing. I'm not talking about sociology here. I'm not talking about you go out to buy bread and you know the bread was made somewhere and that somewhere had this farm over here. And I don't mean a connection in that way. You're not connected. It doesn't operate in that way. The connections occur because, given the argument, the notion of discourses are established. I'll get back to this question of discourse. Just write it down for timing. A discourse, in the way it's being used in Untimely Meditations, parentheses, Foucault, Deleuze, Guattari, Lyotard, Donna Haraway, my own work, other people's that are in this sort of wing of things. This notion of discourse sounds like language, to discours. That's French, discours, talk. But it means that somehow a coherent surface, that famous surface, is created that you must bump up against. Whether or not you want to deal with racism, you're going to be dealing with it. You can walk into a store and you don't have to open your mouth before you will be compelled to become there's something that takes place. Whether it's because you're female or male, or you're seen as being gay, or you're seen as being straight, or you're seen as being, something takes place, communicate, and this thing is called a discourse. And it's these discourses that allow for the proliferation of events and happenings. We'll keep going back to this, events and happenings. How are we doing so far? Any questions? Okay. Next point then. So I certainly recommend that you look even closer at that. I sent it around by email, the preface, and of course I also sent the link to Anti-Oedipus, so you don't have to buy the book, but so it's all there. Did you have a question? No. Like being in an auction. You move, eyebrow. Okay. Okay, so Next step, moving carefully over to the famous Heidegger, who, by the way, was a fascist. Great. Okay. But I mention this in reality, not just to remind you that you steal from whomever you can, if they've got something you can take, but to be careful from whom you steal. Because you might just bring in too much stuff. The Trojan horse problem. I call it the Trojan horse problem. Where you steal something and suddenly you get a whole lot of other things you weren't quite counting on when you grab it. So just bear in mind that with everybody. Heidegger is just the more obvious version. But Heidegger wrote this book. Check that somewhere. Yes, but that's not the one I'm on. He wrote many books, the bastard. So you could be reading wherever. This book, much smaller, much lighter, light green, throws you off. You might think it's not so serious, little bright little covers like so. The Question Concerning Technology and Other Essays. This particular translation, which is by William Lovitt, L-O-V-I-T-T, which, by the way, you can find online, is a better one to read before you go to where Dane is. Yes, he pushes it away. Trojan horse. And what he argues, as I mentioned last week, what he argues in that book, is several essays. But in the position on the question concerning technology, I'm going to just open it out again. He's going to start talking about, well, we're going to start borrowing from that essay a way in which we're going to re-establish this notion of event, surface, discourse, truth, art, identity, the political. So there's a lot writing on that in that essay that I need you to get a sense of. So, as with all philosophy text, you should always come to them sideways. Don't come to them full on going, okay, what do you got to say here? Let's see here, because you won't learn anything. You got to come to it sideways. And as I mentioned in one of the seminars, the lectures the last time, read the table of contents, read the back, take it in the bathroom, read it upside down, try different ways, come to it sideways so that you're not in the full glare of it. Otherwise, it's just too difficult. It's only after a few times that you've come sideways to it in your various ways that you will be able to open it up and actually look at it. There's a thing in the Jewish religion that you're not allowed to read the Talmud, not the Talmud, by. Anybody writes in, it's not the Talmud. It's the Kabbalah. You're not allowed to read the Kabbalah until you reach 40. And since 40 is now the new 20, until you reach 60. Okay, so whatever. You're not allowed to read it because it just won't make sense. It'll just sound too childish in a certain sense. It's the same thing with this. Come to it sideways before you read it head on. You just like, it'll be a good bedtime reading. It'll be better than Valium. You just like, you go right to sleep, so you won't stay with it. So what he's saying in this is he makes the argument, and this goes back to what I was saying, what I stroke Michelle, I've now turned into Michelle Foucault, what Michelle and I were saying about the question of truth. There's a truth. Here's the problem with dealing with this stupid question called truth. Truth means that you can count on it. You're telling the truth. So there's a moral position, there's an ethical position, there's an objective position. You could probably set, if I said to you, what time is it? We looked at the clock and then it says, 6 minutes after 7. That's not my opinion that it's 6 minutes after 7. I mean, the clock may be slightly off, it may actually be 8 minutes after 7 or 5 minutes after 7, but it is that. It's not my view that that's what it is. And there's something very, not only consoling and comforting about that, there's something that's just right. It's correct. You can set your, as they say, you can set your store to it. You can see that it's 7 o'clock or a little bit after 7, and that's what it is. So this is, the is of truth is very important. It keeps you sane. It keeps you able to do things. You can make plans. So truth has an ethical component. It has an artistic component. It's all these kind of things that become indispensable. And what Heidegger says is basically there's many forms of truth, but the one he concerns himself with is a truth called aletheia. A-L-T-H-E-I-A. I haven't spelled that right. A-L-T-H-E. Aletheia.
E-I-A.
What is it?
E-I-A.
E-I. There's an H in there. There's an extra H. Anyway, aletheia. Look it up. I can't figure out how to spell. I've been using spell check for too long now. Ruined. Aletheia is an assembled truth, is one way of putting it. It's a truth that emerges, like invention. The argument is that for truth to have sort of that ability to change, that the ability to both have a position and be sort of porous, it has to be able to take on that which makes it up. So a better way of putting that, other than this kind of laborious way, is to say that truth is not something you discover. It is something you invent. Well, anyway, aletheia. Aletheia is an invention, it's not a discovery. You don't go off and discover who you are. You go off and invent who you are. This is the basis of Foucault. This is the basis of Oedipus. Okay, so you had a rough childhood. Drag. Go invent yourself. Nothing like today to start over. And it's not like this, everybody's happy and let's go, say together. It's really not at that level. He's saying it's a stylistics. All existence is a stylistics. It's kind of a game, but a very smart game. It's a game where what's the object of your game? You are the object of your game. It's an assembling of things. Now you're not just assembling things like you go, I think I'll have this, and maybe I'll just borrow that for a second. Have a little bit chesty cough. All this comes to me, and that is who I am. No. Because you have to remember that the individual doesn't exist except in a relation. So you can't just sort of go off and go, I think quietly, I'm now going to wake up tomorrow morning and I'm going to be a physicist. And then the next day you think, no, I'd much rather be a janitor. No, the next day. It doesn't work. You're not inventing yourself at that level. That's not inventing oneself. That's just playing some sort of interesting, stupid game. No, inventing yourself, the stylistics requires that you understand aletheia is the arena around which something can come out of it. Something can be brought together. What else is art? That's something you can pull together and bring something out. Art is an invention. It's not a discovery. And then if you want to really push it, power is an invention. It's just one of those inventions that's a little bit annoying because it's like they say, power corrupts, absolute power is kind of nice. And I say, it's just like, absolute power corrupts absolutely, but if you have it, it's kind of good. I'm just joking. So this way in which one is able to create something is not against anything necessarily, and may in the end turn out that what you're doing is against something. Because you're not operating this invention in a vacuum. So for example, Jacob's work, is it Jacob or Jacob?
Jacob.
Jacob.
Think Jewish. I'm not, but like.
What's that?
Think pronounce it like Jewish kind of way. Jacob.
Oh, Jacob, thank you.
Jacob.
Very easy. I get it now. Excellent. Well done. Okay. In his work, there's an invention of this gay person. it could be presented as though, well, I've just discovered who I am, you know, but when you think about it, that type of gay person never existed in the 1800s, or certainly didn't exist that way. Females didn't even exist that way. Nobody existed that way, whatever that way is. One's inventing. So what Heidegger says, the first thing you need to get a sense of in this question concerning technology is this use of this strange entity of truth called an assemblage of this aletheia. And aletheia works off of, for Heidegger, works off of what he calls a revealing and a concealing. A revealing and a concealing. It's not like you're hiding something, so you're secretly, you know, a mass murderer, but you're coming in here as like, you know, I don't know what, Pollyanna. But rather that the concealing is that which can't be shown because it's not showable. It's like, yes? Oh, I thought you were gonna say that. Did you say something?
No, I moved.
Oh, you moved. It's like, there's a let's say fetish, for example. Fetish is always a fun. Let's think about fetish, for example. Out of all the things I could have chosen, let's just find fetish. The thing about fetish is that if you look at it too closely, it kind of doesn't make any sense. It's, you know, like, have you ever been in a club, in a nightclub? Anybody go to nightclubs in your life, let's say? Okay. Right, so, yeah, it doesn't have to be like yesterday, though it could be. And you know, let's say you're partying and you're partying and you're partying, and then the lights come on, okay? And you look really carefully at everybody and think, wow, gosh, you know, I look terrible, you know, and so do you, actually. We all look terrible. So you can't look too closely, because if you look too closely, the revealing isn't going to be pretty. But more importantly, what he's saying is the lights never come on in a certain sense. You can't see. There's certain things that you cannot see. That it's not about seeing. Lyotard takes that further, and in his introduction to libidinal economy, he says, he stroke she who does not know how to hide does not know how to love. You don't know how to hide. If you reveal everything about yourself, here I am, know me, love me, know all of me, here I am. That's, A, it's not possible to do, but B, let's say on some planet it would be possible to do. It wouldn't allow for the you to be seen if you were completely revealed. So he's saying that, Heidegger's saying that in this aletheia, in this establishing this assemblage, you have this revealing and concealing, not as opposed to each other, not on the one side of the dialectic revealing, on the other side concealing. They're kind of next to each other. Anyway, there's somewhere you can reveal, you can conceal. You can do them at the same time even. But you can't completely reveal 100%, and you can't completely conceal 100%. It would all go down to the great zero if you did this. You completely revealed, it would be expansive to such a degree that it would be in eternity, it would be infinity. And if you completely concealed, it would be to such a extent that it would be zero, it would be nothing. It would be. So, he says that the first thing you need to get a hang of is this thing called aletheia. The second thing is that in aletheia is this relationship of revealing and concealing, which doesn't operate the same way as a dialectic. But it still operates, and I'm going to get to that in just a second. The next major thing he says, so the first is the aletheia and this sort of subpoint, which has, as you know, has two subpoints. One is this revealing, concealing, and the other is this invention of who one is, not by just waking up one day and saying, I think I'm going to, but by gathering, pulling things together, gathering. And this gathering, and the way in which you gather it, becomes who you are, or at least becomes partly who you are. So it's a style in that sense. It's a style of existence, as Foucault will say later. He will also say, Foucault, that it's a technology. A technology. It's a way in which the gathering happens to create this. So the second thing that Heidegger says in Question Concerning Technology is that technology is the name of this art of gathering aletheia. It's the name of this art of gathering aletheia. And for some reason, which we can investigate as we go on to the course, that ability to gather is the postmodern condition. It is the condition around which, as moderns, we are able, because we're either so alienated or so guilty or so in the middle of all this kind of very odd discursive networked environment, that the gathering becomes a way of producing the I of me, the who I am. The gathering. So he's saying that on the, so the first is the aletheia. The second has to do with the techne, the art of gathering. So all of you have gathered yourself here, and the way you comport yourself, the way you sit, the way you talk, the way you dress, is only a tiny kind of expression of this aletheia, of this ongoing relationship you're having always between revealing and concealing and gathering back to yourself. The third thing he says, the first one is aletheia. I'm going to test you on this later. The first one is aletheia. The second one was? Techne, very good. Were you reading your notes?
Yeah. Just as you said that.
The second one was techne. The third aspect of this is that in gathering, something doesn't get gathered. Something gets left over there, out there. That something he calls a standing reserve. There's a million things you could put in your artwork. Why'd you put that and not something else? So you gather something, and that which is left off, like for example in Anna's piece in the studio, she had this very, I don't know how many people have seen it, but she had this very complex, very intricate way of laying out all of her works. There's paper cutouts and metal cutouts and different, and then behind that, in an area that's a trash area, there's all this other stuff that's left over there of your stuff, all right? And it was it was the standing reserve. It was sort of sitting back there. Hi, you didn't like me, you're a bastard. You know, like that, right? Yeah, you pick something that came here, and the rest. Now the standing reserve means that that which is gathered is enframed, not framed, enframed, E-N-F-R-A-M-E-D, enframed. Now in framing, while it sounds close to, it's like charade, sounds like frame, and kind of operates like a frame, in the sense that it gathers and creates some kind of a very loose limit, because that which is not part of the enframing is over there. This enframing is kind of porous. We're just going to use that word, porous. Things can go through the frame. And I'm putting it like this because eventually we're going to really make that frame very wild. That frame is going to start turning into not just a so-called surface like this infinite plane. It's going to look like a matrix. It's going to have lots of things that come in. It's going to have all different things. So the enframing is the word that allows you to have multi-dimensions, timing, moving, sleeping, pleasuring, multidimensional whatever features, whilst at the same time, simultaneously, having the standing reserve. So, aletheia, techne, and framing stroke standing reserve, they're kind of connected. Now, this framing stroke standing reserve business is clearly not the whole picture, because it's not the same thing as saying all that there is and all that there's not taken together makes the whole reality. What it's saying is that I've got this technique of pulling something together, this techne, pulling something together. I select this, I leave some of that out. The sum of that out that you leave is not the entire universe that you've left out. It's something that could have been in but isn't for whatever reasons. You didn't like it, the color wasn't right, you had too much, you're tired. It doesn't matter what the reason is. It's just not there. It's not in this thing. So it's standing there like going, here, meet me, hello, you know, and it's standing in this so-called stand, and so it can give an order. No, what I mean, I don't mean like it can give a command. I mean it can help order something. So the standing reserve is a very odd animal. The standing reserve, let's say just visually, we can put it like, let's say visually this table is going to be our enframing moment. And we've left out that thing over there, we've left out the lovely pen that John has sort of gently given. This was from you, right?
No.
Now, who left this? Hi, Anna. You know, I just want you to know that Anna has left me many things. Oil, pens, and I have been thanking people all over this. Thank you so much for the oil. It was so wonderful. I didn't give it to you. Oh, thank you for the oil. No, it wasn't me either. Who was it?
I nicked them from upstairs.
Well done. You know, you're
You always seem to have a lack.
That's right, I know. It's true. I have the lack. I am the lack. I'm lacking the lack lately, but anyway, that's not an issue. Okay, that's just too much information. Okay, now, let's say it's not part of it. We bring it in to be part of it. This is a little bit messy, but let's say this is on. We've set this out for reasons that it just works. That's why these books are here. And I add this, and nothing really changes. It doesn't look like it's done anything. Whereas if I knocked over this, and let's say there was something in it, it might change a few things. So this is a very bad example of what I'm trying to say. But what I'm trying to say is that you can bring something out from the standing reserve, and it will create an extra order, an extra layer of how like your paint. You bring your paint into your film, and it starts giving another layer to the order. So the standing reserve is not innocent. It's not just sitting there going, you know, damn, wasn't included. The standing reserve is like an irritated lover. Okay, how can I ruin your life? You know, so the standing reserve is much more at that level. Okay, God knows how to learn Heidegger in a unique and interesting way. Okay, Heidegger would be going, no! Ha, you're dead, I'm not. Anyway, so the standing reserve orders, and it sits there. So what Heidegger is worried about in the question concerning technology, he's worried that the more a social environment is able to be predominantly run by the logic of techne, the more the possibility of the standing reserve can be a much bigger feature and can therefore be the secret ordering device of the techne, of the way in which you choose something. And he says, sort of, that getting into his authenticity obsessions, and therefore his racialisms, he says, you know, bad about technology as a technology, as literally talking about like a computer, because it tends to bring on this relationship between enframing and standing reserve, which might create the love of order, or the fear of order, or the allegiance to order. in a way that he's trying to fight against. So he says famously in this piece, the question concerned, that he says in this piece famously, that technology is not about this thing like technology, like a telephone, exactly. It's about this relationship of aletheia, grasping, the art of grasping, the art of inventing, the art of enframing. What is left out in your enframing isn't the entire universe. Yes, of course the entire universe is left out, but there's actually some stray lover somewhere that's left out, let's say. That enframing creates this other thing. So think about the network. When you're on the net, you're not thinking, oh damn, I've left out the whole of the rest of the network. But the way in which the net ends up making its little connections means that you haven't framed something, but it's not a hard frame. It's a net frame, it's a matrix frame, it's a dimensional frame. And this is what he's beginning to say, that our world, this world today, operates that way, in this kind of understanding of creating not a discourse that is out of language or out of, you know, the collective unconscious, but this other thing that frames. And this is what you need to get a sort of a sense of. End of speech for today. Any questions so far?
So, does the standing reserve have influence over that? But you don't control its influence.
It may have influence the same way as, you know, how many people get, you know, enlarge your penis on, you know, I certainly get these things, these bizarre junk mail, or buy a mortgage, or, you know, what's that?
Rolex watch.
A Rolex watch. You get Rolex watches. I mean, you know, think about it. It's not really making you go, gee, maybe this time I should buy the Rolex watch. What do you think? You know, I mean, one time I got so annoyed at these. I kept getting these ones from Nigeria saying, you know, you have won 6 million pounds or something like this. And eventually one came in with, you know, my husband was killed and he's at the bottom of the ocean, and, you know, as a result I have 50 million, 1,000 billion pounds that I want to give you. I've selected you for, and I called them up because I was so annoyed. And I said, all right, I'm into it. And they said, well, you've got to send your name by the, no, I want to talk to you. And we got in this argument. He said, are you a policeman? Yes. God. Anyway. It doesn't really create it depends on the power relation in a certain, it depends on how much it really mattered that it was in the standing reserve. Obviously, if it's this disgruntled lover that's ready to take you out, it's going to have a lot of impact on this. And in fact, the enframing is going to be a protective device. And it's going to be quite much more solid. Whereas if it's this other thing, what they're trying to describe is this much more fragile thing. So that if you create a thing called a happening, or an event, or a fluxus, it will create a ripple. And the ripple is what will begin to change this technology. Something like that. Just, you know, then later on, when we get into chaos theory, and, you know, the famous butterfly in, you know, Brazil or wherever it was, you know, that then knocked over a building in, you know, I don't know, Ireland. You know, it's like, it's a bit much, really, sometimes, but, you know, but it's this idea of how the ripple works. How it just comes in, very gentle. Actually, I think it was your, or somebody's, whose work was it with the bird on the roof? Is that your work? Did you have bird on the roof? Yeah, very interesting. That was another one of these kind of examples of very quietly creating this kind of techne of that event, that you could feel the ripple coming in to just give it more something. So these are the first introductory baby steps you're getting to get a set, just so you heard some of this stuff. You get a sense of what's at stake. Sex, drugs, rock and roll is how we started off. Why does that matter? Why is that not just, you know, I don't know, indulgence? Why should it matter? What does it mean to be involved with that kind of thing? You know, Foucault died of HIV. He died of HIV, and a lot of people AIDS. A lot of people, AIDS-related illness, a lot of people think that that is because he had unprotected sex. And maybe he did, although he was totally into S&M. And people who are into S&M often don't have the usual form of sex that would in fact do a transmission of HIV, because HIV has to be transmitted anaerobically. A little small discussion on HIV, so we have a training session here. So, so it has to be in an anaerobic environment, i.e. airless. Well, the other way you get HIV in certain ways is passing needles. And I don't mean passing a needle, you know, for, you know, just there's a needle lying on the ground. I mean, you know, that's not, you know, it's passing it immediately so there's an anaerobic environment. It has to be anaerobic, I mean airless. So we do know for a fact that the man was totally into speedballs, which is heroin and speed shots. It is conceivable that he passed away, bless him, through this kind of relation. The reason I mention this is because I think it's important to acknowledge the role, I mean the positive role, I don't mean because he got HIV from drugs, I mean he was doing drugs, and that was part of the world he lived in. Freud, most of his work was written on cocaine, just as an aside. I'm not suggesting that you should now run off and, you know, do crack cocaine or whatever you're doing, you know, do something. What I'm suggesting is that there's a role of pleasure, whatever that means, that you should not lose sight of. That it's not the desire of this kind of like, you're just driven by your desire, like this, you know, you have to have. It's not that level. It's the pleasure of doing something, that you shouldn't forget it. And that's what they're talking about here. How do you bring in this pleasure? Maybe it'll kill you. It's possible. In fact, well, something's going to kill you, you know. But you know, as they always say, be kind to your body because one day it'll rise up and it will kill you. So you know, just something. So there's a role of pleasure. So later on, Foucault uses the word, or it's translated anyway here in the thing, as pleasure. As desire. Later on, he insists on getting rid of the word desire and only talking about pleasure. Because he's talking about inventing, not discovering, not revealing, not finding the inner self. There's no inner self. There's just the technologies that make it so, that make that self happen. And there's also snow outside, which is why I needed to end this slightly earlier, because I'm nervous that I won't get home. And that was my thing. So, are we okay? Welcome. Do you like this room better?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You're okay about being crowded like this? Okay. You feel safe, that's right. No one's coming except for the World Wide Web. Okay.
When did you email that?
Did you get it?
I probably with me starting late last time.
Email me. Like email back.
I emailed you.
Yeah, I got your email. Did you get anything?
But I emailed you yesterday, I think so.
No, I got it. No, I put you in the thing, so obviously you didn't get it. Don't forget to email Grace so she can be inundated with all your emails asking for the template.
I'll be stuck at the other end.
Memory stick, it says. Anna, is that yours?
Who's going to put that?
Stella, is that yours? Jacob, is that your memory stick?
No. Mine is in the Dropbox. So, might be mine.
See? You feel safe, but now you can't move. See? On the one hand.
I can't make it.